Recording on. So as you all know, we are recording these sessions and we will upload the recording on the website in case anyone has to jump earlier. All right, so even though it says Jane Pharma here, my name is Milovan Savic, for those who haven't met me before, and I'll be your host today. So first, I just want to acknowledge the country on which we gather. So the traditional custodians of the land that we work and live on, and acknowledge their elders, past, present, and emerging. Today, I am on the Wurundjeri Oi Wurrung land. In case that you are on some other lands, please feel free to pop in the chat the land you are on. We have today with us, we have Malavika Kadwadkar. Sorry, Malavika, if I'm not pronouncing this perfectly. She's a strategic lead for gender equality at the City of Casey, and I believe that we are all excited to hear what she has to say about the work she's doing for the equal and safe Casey, the City of Casey. Before that, I just want to draw your attention, and some of you might already know this and maybe even already registered for the event. So as part of the Activity Social Connection in Australia project, on June 6th, we are having our public event, Achieving Social Connection and Community Resilience, joining dots between policy, practice, research, and community, which, as you can see, the title suggests. It's, I think, people in this virtual room are exactly the people that we would like to see in the audience. So the event is on June 6th. It's pretty much the whole day event, starts at 9 a.m. and finishes at 4:30 p.m. And it will be in City of Whittlesea at Plenty Regis Arts and Convention Center in South Morang. I will pop up when Malavika starts with her presentation. I'll pop up the flyer and the link for registration in the chat. So in case you are free on that day, we would be more than happy if you can join us. All right, so I'll stop here, and yes, I'll just pass it to Malavika to introduce herself and the topic she'll be talking about. Thanks, Malavika.
Just give me 2 moments. I'm sharing my screen. Please let me know if it pops up.
You can see it.
Yeah, sorry,
Yes.
it's already okay. All right. Before I start, my name is Malavika Kadwadkar. I'm the strategic lead gender equality, as Milovan has already introduced. Thank you so much. Lovely to see you all. Before I start, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners. City of Casey proudly acknowledges the traditional owners, Casey's Aboriginal communities and their rich culture, and pays respect to their elders past, present, and future. We acknowledge Aboriginal people as Australia's first people and as the traditional owners and custodians of the land on which we work and live. So I am on Wurundjeri Woi Wurrung and Bunurong people's land, and I also acknowledge that we are standing that the land that we are standing on was taken without consent, without treaty, and without compensation. I hope that we all are working towards justice and reconciliation. Okay, so here on screen you will see, okay, let me first introduce myself. I am from India, from Mumbai, and I speak 3 languages, Hindi, Marathi, and English. And if there is anything that you don't understand, because you can see my accent is the same, I've not really changed it to the Australian. That's what I'm fighting for, the identity. Just be the way you are, create the safe space, and people will be more happy and peaceful. So please feel free to ask any questions, and if you have not understood anything, let me know. I would like to share with you this little theory of change that we have developed in collaboration with community organizations, peak bodies, and staff. And this provides like a roadmap that helps us guide not only in terms of what we meant to achieve, but perhaps importantly, the process, or what we want to see, what change we want to see happening over the time. This is a 10-year strategy, a safe and equal Casey gender equality strategy and prevention of violence against women and gender-based violence. So that's the main aim. And you can see in this, there are 5 major goal areas. This is based on our Watch Change the Story framework. So the first goal area is that people are not constrained by gender stereotypes and social norms. Women and gender diverse people are independent and actively engaged in decision making. The organizations, institutions, and public spaces are safe, fair, equitable, and that men and boys develop healthier masculinities and positive peer relationships, that positive and equal respectful relationships are strengthened. So these are the major goal areas that we are working for. Council expects that it's the work that we all contribute to bring out change in these goal areas, but we recognize that these changes need to be driven by multiple stakeholders and partnerships, collaborative partnerships at all levels of the society. And that's why the first few years of this plan is committed to building foundations, connecting and establishing partnerships and relationships internally with other partners and also with the communities, and build that trust within the communities, which is very important if we want the buy-in, or if we want them to support this entire change, or we want them in the process of driving this change. So with our staff partners and importantly communities, we foster these relationships. We need to understand who is at the table, but most importantly, who is not at the table, and who is not accessing the services or not engaging with council during the lifespan. So maybe when they are coming here as students, or when they are in that adulthood stage or parenting stage, or even at the older stage, who are accessing the services, who are not. And also understanding the intersections, like from race, or First Nation, gender diversity, ability, and class. Like if there is, with the rates and difficulties as far as the financial pressures are concerned, which section of society is or community is actually accessing, whether it's the one with who is privileged, is having income, or whether it's the one who is not having or is struggling to even find a roof on their head. So we need to have that sort of a knowledge. With this information, I think we'll be able to find out how do we get them at the table and ensure that their voices are not only heard, but they are involved in influencing and making decisions that affect their lives. This is how we will center those who are facing intersecting forms of discrimination. For example, First Nation, culturally and linguistically diverse communities, women with disabilities, and LGBTQIA communities as well. We make sure that we get them and we hear them, and we actively involve and make sure that we are, co-designing, or we are involving them in making that change. So our plan is not prescriptively laid out like for next 10 years, but it is more about collaborating, about bringing those communities at the table, problem solving, co-designing. It's about those partnerships that hold importance. I would be really interested to know your thoughts and feedbacks, and if you can share, after I share the examples that we do, what are you doing? What are the projects, or what are the partnerships that you foster to bring about the change? So then I can stop talking too, and we can have more interactions. These are a few of the principles that are developed as part of the strategic plan and speak to an intersectional approach that can or should guide all the work at City of KC that all the internal teams are doing, not only the team that I belong to, but everyone, because we know that it's everybody's business and not only equity team. It's something that we always say that it will be good to make us redundant, because we want everyone to take up this as their own business and see how policies, their work, they can apply the gender lens, intersectional lens, and if we can make it as part of our work, that will be the way forward. So that's what we are hoping for. Now, these principles are adapted and originally were co-designed as part of an intersectionality toolkit, where my colleague and at City of KC, Teresa Lawler, she's the team leader. She worked with UN Women and developed specifically with a reference group of diverse women from First Nation, youth, from underrepresented groups. So this is from where she's taken, we have kind of developed these principles. The sometimes the process, learning or refining, the agile process that we undertake is more important than the outcome. So how are we learning? How are we improving? How are we kind of making changes in the process, depending upon what are the outcomes that you get at each and every step? That is more important. And obviously, when you do that and you keep tweaking things, the outcomes will always be good, because you're not rigid, you're very flexible, and you're learning all the time and making changes. How and when you see that, okay, this is working, this is not working, and you're changing continuously, you're adapting. So that process is more important. Agile approach, I think, is very important in whatever we do. These processes really hold the key to shifting and challenging the ways how we are doing things. Sometimes I think decolonizing everything that we do is very important. There is particular way that we are in the comfort zone of doing things in a particular way, but sometimes that's not the right way. So we need to kind of shift away, challenge, and do something different and innovative. So I think that's what the process plays the important role. And for each of these principles, there are set of guiding questions that we can apply to any work that we are doing. So let's go within these principles and discuss examples in detail. Okay, so the first principle is we are led by communities and we build on the strengths. When we talk about communities, we talk about diverse communities, but again, in diversity, we need to know which are those communities who have benefited from colonization and which are those communities who have not benefited and who have been continuously discriminated, or who are still facing racism and who are still facing that, barriers in access. So we need to, diversity is a broad term, but we need to nut it down to actually understanding which diverse communities actually we need to work out, or work for, or who are actually facing these problems. Um, so that's why the next point, communities we are not working with, we need to know, we need to build on the strengths of those communities, ensure our communities have the buy-in, or they are the owners, they are leading it, and we are listening and aligning with the community. So we are bringing them to the table, we are listening to them, but if we are not making those relevant changes in whatever we do, then it's something that it's not going to be effective. So it's important to understand who is defining the problem and who is answering these questions and who is not answering these questions. It is important to build trust and actively listen, and go in whichever way, whether it's internally or whether you are within the community engagement space, to go with a blank slate and acknowledge that people bring in their experiences, their journey to the table. So sometimes they may not even have qualifications which are recognized here. Like I was in one session where those men and women did not even know how to read and write, their own community language. English is far, far, far away, So how will you capture their voices? So when I spoke to them in the community language, which was Hindi or Punjabi, that's when they spoke about their experiences of elder abuse and the problems that they're facing here. So unless you have that blank slate, okay, don't assume that they will be knowing simple English. Don't assume that they will know, that they know how to read and write. So your service will not be effective. If they don't know to read and write, how will the service reach to them? And how will you capture their voices? So in these instances, I think it's important to just keep everything out, go like a sponge, go inside and think, what is the community dynamic, who are you engaging with, what's the purpose of that engagement, and what you want to take out. And sometimes more than the purpose, it's about that organic conversation where things just, once that trust is there, communities themselves start disclosing things and saying things that you may not even know that this is the problem, or this is what was expected, or something else comes out of that conversation. So I think it's important that we acknowledge that lived experience and the journey, and not pay too much attention on qualifications, English, educational experience. All that is sometimes not relevant in few contexts. And it's a big decision to come from a country where they have grown up and lived for years, and there are various reasons that people come from that country to Australia, or they migrate to Australia, some for safety reasons, some because they are skilled migrants. But even though they are skilled, they come here and they know that it's not that easy, even though they are skilled to get a job. It's people, it's like a chicken and egg story. Where is the Australian experience? But if I don't get a job, how will I get an Australian experience? And they go round and round in circles. So all these nuances, I think, are very important. So please take time to listen to those experiences, to understand the intersectional discrimination and adjust the implementation accordingly. Always share back the evaluation or findings within the communities, and also internally with your other stakeholders. Because sometimes I think internal stakeholders, the ones who are in the decision making or policy making, may not understand few of these contexts. So it's important to report back to them or to tell them the learnings, and also to make sure you are sharing that with the community as well, so that that trust or that feedback loop is completed and the trust is not broken. So just to give you an example, there is this gender equality task force that I am heading at City of KC, and it's quite diverse. We have got First Nation, it's made up of 25 women and gender diverse people. And we have 25 women, and we have women from First Nation. We have gender diverse people. We have transgender women in there. We have people from Africa. We have people from Afghan, India, Sri Lanka, and at different ages. So young and older age, the older being the 80-year-old who is from Holland, and migrated here and settled here. And the recent one will be maybe the ones who have migrated 5 or 7 years back to Australia from Afghan background. So imagine the group which is so diverse, and how will you make sure that they are all engaged? Because there has to be some common thread that brings them together, and that is about safety and inclusion. Because there are few with lived experience of violence, and they all understand that they need to work on gender inequality and promote equality to make sure that they create spaces that are inclusive, and that's what they want to take back to their groups. So this sort of a thing is when we kind of capture their requirements, and through them the requirements of the groups that they are attached to, and we feed into the policies and the community engagement strategies in prevention space. So the simplest example that came across through that group was, we don't have safe spaces, or our communities want to meet, but there are no safe spaces where women can even discuss these issues. Somewhere there is someone who is with them, and they are just not comfortable. Second problem that they shared is the language. Sometimes we want to just, be, if someone can speak in simple language, that will be better. If we don't understand the context, someone said that, what are these pronouns? Like if you see in few communities, they is said to, is, we say it as out of respect for elders, elders meaning 50 plus or senior citizens, they are called as they. So when pronouns like she, they are used, they don't understand what is she, they. Because in few communities, if there is a person from gender diverse background, we just call them by name. We don't say she, they, he, or whatever, So the pronouns education is a very Australian context, and it's come up because we want to make sure that we are making the space inclusive, which is agreed. But that education is needed in multicultural communities. They will not understand why those pronouns are used in first place, because they don't use it in their own countries or in their own culture. So those are the simple nuances that when you are engaging with the diverse communities, you will know. And then getting the buy-in for projects, like we had those communities supporting us for 16 days of activism, where they led it from the front, where they shared their, they were the first time speakers who shared their lived experience. So they were the ones who came up and did the project. They led it. They were the MCs. They were the ones who did the activities. It was in true sense community led, but there was a buy-in and there was a trust. A confidentiality was maintained. Okay, so the next, this is something that we all kind of know, that we do not live single issue lives, and discrimination plays out in people is different and dependent on unique combination of racism, ableism, sexism. So If you can see, ableism drives high levels of violence against women and girls with disabilities, gender inequality and sexism, homophobia and preferencing, heterosexual relationships, the ongoing impacts of colonization for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, racism, particularly with people from migrant and refugee backgrounds. So just to give you an example, even to get a job for a woman with color, myself being also a lived experience, I have had big trouble and I faced anxiety issues even getting a job here in Australia. So I can only imagine if a person is also middle-aged, maybe 50 plus, is also having a disability and sometimes even having gender diversity, how that woman or that person will find, job market, how difficult it will be to get into a mainstream. And if that person has a lived experience of violence, with that something that has impacted mental health and confidence and self-esteem, you can only imagine with this intersecting barriers that that person will face to get a job, to access services, to even disclose that there is a problem. And where do I go and disclose if there are service providers who do not represent them? Like, they need to have someone that they see themselves in. To not have that representation in itself creates a barrier sometimes. So we need workforce again, which is diverse in terms of, again, as I always keep mentioning, not broadly diverse, but actually the ones who we need on the table to represent those particularly discriminated communities. So we need to keep checking our policies to make that workforce more represented in terms of social justice and in terms of having that broadly represented in the workforce. So we have that trust built up. Today, if I can go in the communities and talk to them, is because they trust me and because they know that, okay, fine, we can talk to her in simple Hindi and, I will not be ridiculed, will not be questioned for our experience, will not be questioned for our educational qualification. That sort of trust is very important. We need to collect disaggregated data. I think that is something that we all are aware, where we need to leave room for self-identification, transparency, privacy, accountability, and also discover some patterns. We all do Excel sheets with pivot tables. So, we'll discover a pattern where certain gender along with certain race are mostly the ones who are not using services. Or those patterns, I think, are particularly important to understand where to use the resources. We are always looking for funds. The funds are always restricted. So if we use this data in a way that we know which are the communities we need to put our resources on, will be the right way to do things. Because within communities also, there are few communities who are doing okay. They are privileged. They have been benefited from colonization. And also there are community leaders who eventually reach at certain stage where they become they kind of get those colonization practices within themselves, and they don't realize now they are not representing the broader voice, but they are representing themselves. So if we collect and if we engage with people, we will know which community organizations, which community leaders actually are representing that broader voice and are really working, doing some work at the ground or with the people, and are not representing themselves and using the system for their own benefits. So these are few things that, the data will bring out, and the conversations and engagements will bring out in the work that we do. So for example, First Nation rainbow communities and few lower socio-economic groups in few areas, which are broadly in KC as well as maybe in northern suburbs. We need to focus on how can we help in job selection, or how can we make sure that they know how to write the selection criteria. That's a new concept. This is just one example that I'm giving you. Selection criteria, tweaking jobs, tweaking resumes for every job is an alien concept. I have never done it myself. One resume goes everywhere. That was what I knew. I came here and first 3 years went in figuring out why I have to tweak resume again and again to fit in that job descriptions. That is something which is new. Then Driving, again, why is driving essential? You imagine to do those lessons, to have a car and not have that finance. So if you make driving essential, you're again targeting that privileged section of the society who have already taken lessons and who have big cars or who can manage that. So they are getting the jobs, and the ones who are dependent, who do not have access to lessons, who do not have cars, how will they get a job if you put that as a criteria? So thankfully at City of KC, we have tweaked that and we have made that not essential unless it's a field job, and that's like you need a driver for L2P class or something, or if that's a field job and it's essential criteria, then yes. But if it's a job where you need to reach a particular place, let it be the decision of the community. You don't tell them how to come. So they just need to come at that place. Let them figure out. But you're opening that job for many others by not restricting to that particular criteria that driving is essential. Just one example to think of when we are doing the job description. Let's go to the next slide. We recognize challenge power dynamics, including our own. This is very important. Always, when I say about going in with a blank slate, you will check on your power dynamics, you will check on your assumptions, you will check on anything that is related to the power as a council officer. For example, when I go within the community, I don't go in as a council officer. If I say that, they will not disclose. I go there, okay, I'm here as a community member first. I will listen to you and I will see what needs and priorities you have, so I can take it back to the council and see how can I help you out, or how can I change, or how can I bring that to the table. But if you go in, okay, I'm the council officer, and you will just sit with that power, people are not going to disclose, or people are not going to even accept in first place. They will not develop that trust. So that power dynamics is very important. Critically reflect on your personal biases. We all have unconscious bias and we don't even know when it plays out. So the more we know that, the more we know ourselves, the better we will engage with people, and the better will be, even you will find it easier to have those social connectors, or those people who will lead you to other groups. For example, when I was at the MCWH forum the other day, I was speaking, as a community member, but also as a council officer. There was one lady who came and said that I am one from Nepalese community and I have faced DV. I have a lived experience and I want to do something for my community, but I live in Melton. Can you please see how can I make a difference within Melton area, because there is a lot of Nepalese community out there. All I did, she was a social connector, community leader. All I did is try to find out someone from Melton Council. And because sitting at KC, I cannot do anything for Melton, right? There's a scope of work. We all have our, people in each council doing their beautiful, wonderful work. So I just put that social connector to the Melton Council. Now, it actually depends on Melton Council to pick that up, to see how they can support the Nepalese community within that area in this prevention space, because there's definitely something that can be worked out. But when these social connectors or these leaders come, it's important to also acknowledge their time, their expertise and their experience. And, no one wants to continuously do free work and voluntary work. Sometimes it's also about their bills. So that's another thing that I will always say, that please recognize, please reimburse them. Also see how you can open up pathways for them for work. Don't just, I would request that don't use the intel, use the ideas, and just keep taking that and not give back. See how you can reimburse, see how you can open those pathways where they get work and where they can make a difference. I think that's important. So that power is with you as a council officer, but also there is a power with community leaders. Sometimes few leaders are already in that power dynamics where they are at certain position, where they've reached that position, but sometimes they then lose the ground. They lose that connect with the community, because then it's about themselves and them and their power. So they forget that. So you also need to kind of keep that in mind, that who are you engaging with, and if that power dynamics is playing out in that context. So people will always experience power in one context time and oppression in another. Like a person can be discriminated maybe or face racism at workplace, but that person can have that power in the family where he's oppressing or she's oppressing or they are oppressing or people are oppressing someone within the family. So the context can be different. So we need to understand those power dynamics that plays out within ourselves, within the workplace, and also within the communities. And another important point, as I said, is share power always. Don't hoard the power. I think once job insecurity plays out in Australia, we all know, but we need to also realize that we need to share power with others, where if we want innovative ideas, if we want to do something different, we need more people, more diverse people on the table, and we need to share power. There was a comment made that yeah, it's good to have people, from different backgrounds when they are doing implementing work, they're doing the job and they are connecting with the multicultural communities. But to make that decision making or to have them at the table where there is a decision making, we don't want them because they don't have the experience, because they don't have the qualification. So you're saying that to get that funds and to deliver projects effectively, you will want multicultural people, but you will not want them at the decision making table, because then you feel that insecurity. What if my job is gone? How will I justify? So that sort of a power dynamic, please, is something that plays out. And I'm just requesting everyone to make sure that you share power. There are more innovations. There are a lot of opportunities. Everyone needs to just survive. So give that safe space for everyone. And this can play out in workplace, as I mentioned, in community as well. So always keep that check. Consider alternative platforms, when people can be on WhatsApp, can be on Facebook, can be on video, like what are the languages? Again, why I'm discussing this in power, because when people have that privilege, they have all those resources. They have tabs, they have iPads, they have mobile phones, they have internet, but there are people who do not have all that. So how are you engaging then with those people is something that, it needs to be figured out. So then going in person, talking in language is much better, or community-led consultation is much better. Okay, I think I can. Okay, there's one more example that an African person came and told me that when I reported about domestic violence in police, I was not taken seriously, because the assumption was it's African gangs, it's normalized, it's normal within you to use violence. So because of my race and my color, I was not taken seriously. But imagine if someone who was white would have gone, the police will have taken that seriously. So these dynamics play within the community in domestic violence sector. And again, same thing with gender diverse, because it's not yet, with the recent episodes, it's something that we need to support more, that people are not taken seriously when they report. Firstly, the safe space is not there. And when they garner the courage to report, they're not taken seriously. So they will never go again and approach those services. Okay, we understand that one size does not fit all. I think I have already spoken about this a lot, and I would leave it up to you now to discuss more examples. But one example is conflicts within the family. We need to realize that within the family itself, parents and children, there are conflicts on behaviors, on how things work. Sometimes first generation migrants, the experience that they have, that do not relate to the second generation. They may look the same, but they just don't understand, and there are conflicts regarding that, in terms of what will be, how serious you are about a job or how serious are you about the money is always a conflict. We feel that there is a conflict that children are taking things very lightly. It's on the platter, whereas we have struggled a lot to get the same thing. That conflict is always there. So I think it's important to also understand that sort of a thing within a community and a family that plays out across different generations, and the generational trauma that plays an important role even in financial, even in family violence. That's another thing that is important. Intergenerational trauma. We draw on evidence and diverse knowledges, especially those with lived experience of inequality. I think I have spoken about this. Who told us this? Who has been consulted? How do we most meaningfully and safely engage those with lived experience of inequality? Bring them to the table, give them that knowledge, give them that safe space, and they will share everything. And after sharing, make sure you are making those relevant changes and giving that empowerment to those communities who are coming to the table and sharing that knowledge, but also who are not coming, and what are the barriers? Why are they not at the table to tell you what is happening? So recognizing different cultures and ways of communicating, having that time, share power and knowledge, acknowledge the knowledge and intel, that they bring. But also, I think it's important to kind of, okay, I was about to say something and it just skipped my mind. I was supposed to give you an example. It will come back and I will give it to you. Yes, when we are doing any of the work, we always depend on evidence that is already there, research that is already there. But we do not realize that research that is already there is also not intersectional. Who are involved in doing the research? What was the sample size? There is always a restriction on funds and scope. Not everyone cannot do everyone. So everything. So when those researches were done, the samples were basically white samples, not multicultural. Our job is to build on that evidence, but how can we apply it on multicultural communities? See, all that requires time, space. If we are looking for easy path and low-lying fruits, we are never going to reach and do something more innovative, because that requires a lot of patience. So I think that's important. And my work with Australian Health Research Alliance and Women's Health Research Translation and Impact Network, work with the researchers is exactly that. When you don't go with a statement that you think you want to research on, but understand what the problem community is actually facing and research on that, and bring the consumers on the table to research on that. So for example, something like co-sleeping, there is a big thing. In multicultural communities, we always co-sleep. I have co-slept, and it's not a problem. It's there in few cultures, but it's a big thing in research that it's not safe, and councils provide cribs. What people will do when nurses are coming, they will show the baby sleeping in the crib, and when the nurses are gone, they will co-sleep. So why have those sort of things? Instead, see what practices can be made safe, and how can you make that research where these are the cultural things. It's not colonization plays a very important role. Who has set those rules of breastfeeding, co-sleeping, and who can, what is the culture, and what was the sample size then, and how can we now change it to culturally safe practices? It's happening for years and years in certain communities. So it's not that it's not safe, but what are the principles that we can research on, we can set as practices, something that researchers need to work on. Just an example to think. We consider accessibility and reasonable accommodations. I think it's very important. Transportation, information, language. How can we address those barriers? So do we have screen readers? Do we have Braille? Local languages used? Do we need interpretation? In recent project at Lynbrook, where I'm involved with young students, we needed to translate in Dario, Farsi and Hindi to make them understand respectful relationships or what we want to talk to them. So if these programs are done in such a way, I think the impact or the outcome is much better. So how can you make those changes in the implementation? Who can you involve? Bicultural workers, peer workers, or people from the council, or whichever scope partners you have, how can you bring them, collaborate, and make sure you are providing that access to the communities is important. Providing taxi vouchers and, providing times, child-friendly options, time that is convenient with the communities, days that are convenient with the communities. So we don't work on weekends. Nobody likes to work on weekends, but that's the only time when communities can give time to some sort of engagement. So how can we figure that out? How can we make sure our staff is supported and also the communities are engaged? So we need to know that. Again, verbal and non-verbal skills. Sometimes you really don't require verbal skills. Ancestors, English language or languages were developed much later. Before that, it was non-verbal. So even in non-verbal skills, you can communicate acceptance. You can communicate genuine curiosity. So that is important.
Hi, Malavika, sorry if to jump in. It's really inspirational listening with passion that you're explaining all this. I'm just mindful of the time. So if you can just wrap up in a few minutes so that we then leave the time. Thank you.
I think it's almost over. We respect, uphold dignity, choice, and autonomy. Women don't want to report about domestic violence. Why they don't want to report? It's their choice, their cultural thing where they don't feel comfortable. Just accept that and see how you can support. If they're coming again and again and telling you the story, give them a hearing voice. Don't say, why is she saying again and again the same thing? I've told her these are the referral pathways. You need to report here to do this. But they don't want to report. They don't have the confidence or the trust. So understand that and leave that autonomy to that woman or to that person. I think it's important to give that space to them. And yep, I think that's the last slide. So